Do you think I'm
What are your
really stoked
real feelings
about
on it?
updating my Windows machine, by the way, in the age of COVID? In that I don't think that it's going to have absolutely something to do with fucking COVID somehow.
Viruses.
Dude.
The master of viruses. Okay, it looks like we are live on Facebook. Yep, that is working.
I'd like to take a time to shout out our new sponsor, Panera Bread, who is becoming exceptionally more broy. And
broy?
Let me tell you, they're offering like sort of like Health Bro. Like for an upcharge, you can get a nice. You don't got to worry about that fucking piece of bread or apple or chips bullshit. For $1.99, you can get a nice cucumber and tomato salad, enjoyed cold. And
that sounds pretty good.
You can put extra steak on that steak sandwich. And let me tell you, it is it's not the extra steak that you would suspect from Panera Bread. It's like it is extra steak.
Interesting. So it's like actually extra steak.
It is extra steak, my friend.
I like extra steak. Okay, it looks like we are live on YouTube. There we go. Sorry we are late, guys. As you know, it is tradition. This would not be a King Pilled episode if we weren't running late. Unfortunately, what that means is that we're going to have to go a little shorter than we usually do because I have to be done by 2:30. Mm-hmm. But let me make sure. Okay, Periscope is working as well. Yep. All right. So, I'll just give it another minute here to try to get a few more people in because I have some kind of opening comments I want to make to prepare people for the episode because I don't have any idea where this episode is going to go. And I want to make sure...
It's a blank piece of paper today.
It is. We are tabula rasa today. And...
You know...
Go ahead.
I realized officially that I'm like old and irrelevant now because there were two hilarious like stories that I wanted to like relay and just kind of talk through, and I thought it'd be, oh man, it's pretty funny. We could do it when we're waiting for people to join, stuff like that.
Okay.
And I can absolutely say neither of them. Like, there's just no way. I mean, just immediate, yeah.
Like
hilarious.
Immediately removed from the internet.
1000%.
That's a shame.
1000%. Yeah.
That's too bad.
I remember, man, just funny things in general. It used to be fun to like talk about them and share them with people.
Right.
And, like the internet seemed like a place where it would be like really cool to share them with like people you don't interact with on a one-on-one basis normally. It would have been really cool if that was possible.
There still is places you can do that on the internet.
Yeah.
It's just...
Well, I mean, sure, in the supporting listeners group. I mean, obviously,
right.
In the I'll tell people in the Patreon.
Yeah, that's where we've been having all these conversations. You know, just the supporting listeners. We got a great thread going there. We've been having a really, really fantastic conversation.
Yeah, it's not like a grifty maneuver or whatever. I mean, it just I want to share it with the YouTube audience, but I literally can't.
Well, so. right now, I think that the conversation is at a really elevated level, and you know, you were sending voice messages earlier, and I was not because I don't send voice messages, but you know that thread there, that chat is just really hopping. It's really at an elevated level, and I think that before we can add more people to our supporting listeners thread. They need to demonstrate to us that they are willing to maintain the high level of discourse. So really, it's not an us thing; it's a them thing. It's the audience's fault that they aren't in the supporting listeners group yet. Those who aren't.
The Yakuza doesn't just accept all applications.
Right. Obviously.
Yeah, because people would just fuck around and be like, "Oh shit, I'm in the Yakuza for real."
Yeah.
You know, they want to avoid that wherever possible.
I can't wait to get all the questions from people about how to get into the supporting listeners group.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we got some viewers in here now. What's up, Emma? Shout out Emma, our resident Brit, and her she brings with her British class.
Emma, is it like what 9:30 in your land? Well, we did daylight saving, so 8:30. Like what is it there?
Does the UK not do daylight savings?
I don't fucking know. All I know is that changing the clocks after this time that we change them is literal white supremacist violence. Disproportionately negatively impacts historically marginalized groups, and it can't happen. It needs to stay exactly how it is right now and never change again.
Preach.
That's the only thing I know.
Preach that gospel. Okay.
I'm right.
Well, let's
speaking of,
let's get this kicked off. Yeah. Speaking of, that's a nice segue. Look at
that. That's weird.
So okay, clocks go forward this weekend in the UK. Interesting. So they it's 8 o'clock there right now. Very, very interesting. Okay. Well, welcome aboard, folks. This is another episode of King Pilled, and I am your host, Matthew Erickson. You can follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled, and that guy over there that's doing weird stuff with his fingers is the other host.
I'm trying to make a K.
Oh,
I'm trying to think of like a cool sign for us. Yeah, I'll figure it out.
K is that, isn't it? Isn't it like that's K and that's P or something in sign language?
Are you doing like actual sign language?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, that's not what I'm trying to do at all.
Oh, okay. You're doing gang signs.
I'm trying to make a fucking K with my fingers.
It would be like that.
Yeah. We'll get there.
Yeah, we'll make sure that at some point, along with the logo, we'll get that as well. But yeah, so that other guy you're hearing,
we got to figure it out before our first live. I mean, we have to do it so all the fans can throw up the K.
Right, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we have three fans, and they're all throwing up Ks next to each other. So only 3 people that show up.
And we're at 999 subscribers, which is like, let's flip it over and So that other guy that you're hearing over there, that other joker, that is the other host, Stephen Messina. He is also known as Liberal Steve. You can follow him on Twitter at Messina Inc. Inc. spelled INK, because he is a good libertarian who identifies himself with corporations.
Yes.
So this episode, for most of you guys who do us a favor and like this episode, and subscribe if you haven't already, and then also share the show. We want to try to get this message out, particularly this one. I think this is where we're really going to start getting into the meat of why we started this podcast and the type of things that we want to discuss. We're on the cusp of an age. We're at the end of one age, transitioning into another, and there's a lot of open territory that needs to be. It's like there's a new world ahead of us, a new world in front of us, and we want to bring order to that new world. So, our goal is to kind of kickstart some of these conversations, and there's a lot of people who are already talking about some of the stuff that we want to talk about here, but. Part of how I see myself, at least, and the way that my conversations with Steven, when we're not on the air, the way that they kind of have worked out is it seems like we see ourselves as like synthesizers. We are pulling together a variety of different views from a variety of different people who are all sort of talking about the same general concept from different angles or from different perspectives. And we're both voracious like readers and listeners to weird content and just like the deep nerdy philosophical stuff that makes most people's eyes glaze over. And we see ourselves, I think, as like I don't see myself as capable of being the original explorer of the territory. Like I don't have that instinct in me, really. What I do is I follow immediately behind the people who are carving out the new territory, and I try to troubleshoot and debug and synthesize the new data that they're uncovering, and then I try to turn around and get it in front of other people, try to get other people's attention with it. So it's almost like if you imagine like the Lewis and Clark expedition, and then they had people there who were like documenting what they were doing. I mean, they were doing it themselves kind of, but you might just think of a hypothetical Lewis and Clark expedition where you have people who are exploring this new land, and they bring along with them like scribes and journalists who are documenting and parsing all of the new discoveries. That's kind of how I've seen myself. And so I'm not, as we start this conversation, I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know exactly what we're going to talk about. I mean, I know where we're going to start, but I don't know where it's going to end. And my goal with this is to bring some stuff to different people's attention and to get people talking about this so that more people can begin digging into these subjects. And, we can bring as many perspectives as possible, because, two heads is better than one, and four is better than two. And ultimately, human consciousness is made up of the accumulated mass of everyone's individual consciousness. As you pull them all together and you get a collective consciousness. So it's just a collection of perspectives, I guess is one way that you could look at it. But so anyways, that was my long way of saying, please share the show. So right now, I was just telling Stephen before we started that I think that I'm kind of going through like a spiritual awakening. And it's very fascinating because I grew up very religious. I grew up in a devout Christian home and spent the first half of the time that I've been alive so far, more than that even, like deep in study of like doctrine and theology and Christian apologetics and all this sort of thing. And that's kind of what I was steeped in. And then around the time I went to college, as happens with a lot of people, I kind of drifted away from those subjects. They just sort of, they'd always been kind of academic to me, and they just kind of lost their relevance to me from my perspective. So I kind of drifted away, and I got into sports, and then from sports I got into economics, and then from economics I got into philosophy. From philosophy I got into politics, or economics got me into politics. Politics got me into philosophy, and philosophy led me back to religion. So I did this big circle and wound up back where I started. But now I'm looking at all the same things that I was looking at before, but from a completely different angle. So it was like I was hiking up to some great mountain, and I'm looking at the one face of the mountain, and I'm trying to study all the sides of it. And then I turned to the left and just started walking away around, and spent miles just circling back around. And now I came up behind the mountain from the other side. And I'm like, whoa, when you look at it from this direction, it's a completely different mountain. It's got totally different features and characteristics. And now that I'm looking at it from a different angle, I can understand it a lot better than I did before. And so that makes me be like, okay, well, I want to look at this from every possible angle. I've seen this mountain that is Christianity, in essence, from multiple different angles at this point. And each time I look at it from a different angle, I get a different insight into its nature and its implications for my life and the lives of those around me. And so now I'm like, I feel this compulsion that I need to study it from every possible angle. It's like my mind is craving that this picture be made whole, that I be able to see it from every possible angle and put together a comprehensive picture of it. And it's like as long as that whole is left, as long as that part is not made into a whole, a whole starting like WHOLE. As long as the part has not been made whole, I feel like I'm not whole. Like I need to understand this entire dynamic, and once I do, that will give me satisfaction. That'll make me feel satiated. And so, going back to what I was saying before, I feel like I'm kind of I serve as kind of a synthesizer of perspectives. I'm not the one coming up with the new ideas. I'm bringing together ideas from other people who are talking about them. And lately, if you've listened to any episodes here before, you've heard us talk about Curtis Yarvin, about Mencius Moldbug, and his views on the world and the way that he digs into politics. He's initially talking about politics, but he does a similar thing where he kind of backdoors into politics. He starts off with it, but then he circles around the mountain and he comes in the backside, and he digs into things that where he demonstrates that politics is much deeper than politics, and that what's going on in politics is much deeper than the surface level conversations and arguments and happenings and legislation and whatever else. That these are all they're the tip of the iceberg, and the real meat, or the real body of the iceberg, is down under the water, and he's diving down under there, and he's describing the base of the iceberg. And I've hesitated defining myself, as I've described this stuff to people. I've hesitated to define myself as NRX, as neo-reactionary, which is basically the school of thought that is championed by Curtis Yarvin, among a few others. And
mostly because it's a terrifying name. Also, it sounds like immediately you should be on a list.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
And I have no doubt that that's where it's going to go. That people who identify as NRX are ultimately going to be. I mean, now people who identify as libertarians are already on lists, so it's kind of like you're going to be on a list no matter what. But if I'm going to be on a list, I don't want to be at the top of it. I'll put it that way.
If I want to be on a list, I don't want it to have neo in front of it. It already starts with an N. You know, it's too easy for him. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I feel like if I identify myself with a coherent, identifiable movement or body of people, that's the quickest way to get a target on my back. As long as I am not, as long as I don't have a label put on me about what I believe or what my intentions are, then I feel like it's much easier to slide under the radar and to not get whack-a-moled. So
yeah, well, I mean, this is where I disagree, because I feel very comfortable. I feel very comfortable referring to myself with what I am, which is just a neoliberal. I mean, I'm fine with that. You were at You were at the school of neo-reactionary thought. So
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so it was the wrong neo. That's just neo. Like the fact that neo is the term that we're going on with, like, given the subjects that we've been. Yeah. Anyways, you guys will understand where we're going here eventually. So the person who has been influencing me most recently is, well, let me go back before that. Just before I say that, there was someone who had a really profound influence on me and started me down this path of studying archetypes and mythology and religion and like the science of religion. That was Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson was the one who really got me looking at these. It's like I went on that jaunt around the backside of the mountain, and Jordan Peterson was the one who first got me looking at the mountain again and looking at it from a new perspective and a new light. And so I kind of had this, in recent years, I had this foundation of Jordan Peterson. Obviously, it wasn't my ultimate foundation, but just in my recent thinking, it was a kind of a foundation of Jordan Peterson, and then layered on top of that was Murray Rothbard and Ludwig von Mises, and then layered on top of that was Curtis Yarvin. So it's kind of like that's how these ideas have percolated their way up through my mind. And now Ven Armani is the guy whose words are having the greatest impact on me at the moment. And so Steven's been talking to him for a while. He's been as Ven. For those of you who know who Ven is, I'll just keep talking about this. If you don't know who Ven Armani is, then we'll be talking to him on the show eventually. He's already confirmed that. So you'll learn then. You can go look him up now. But I don't want to spend this time talking about who he is, because right now what I'm trying to do is talk about his ideas more than him. What were you going to say, Stephen?
No.
Oh, okay. Looked like you were going to say something. So Vin is his new book is going to be released shortly, and I have been reading an advance copy because he's going to be on Wealth, Power, and Influence with Jason Stapleton tomorrow. And so his new book is called Render Unto Caesar. Oh, did you not know that, Stephen?
No.
Oh, I forgot to tell you that. Yeah. Vin is going to be on Wealth, Power, and Influence tomorrow. So I think that primarily we'll be talking about Bitcoin is probably where the majority of the conversation will revolve. And Vin moved to Saipan a year ago, near Guam when this whole COVID thing was first going down. And he's been operating in business there. And so there's these dynamics of like, small community life and governing it and business and transactions and the innovation he's doing in the crypto space. That's kind of the stuff we'll be talking about tomorrow on Wealth, Power, and Influence. But so Vin is releasing this new book. It's called Render Unto Caesar: Prophecy, Profit, and Proof of Work in the Dim Age. And I started reading this book yesterday because he sent it to me as I was booking the interview tomorrow. And Stephen had been reading it recently. Vin had sent it to him, and he was telling me, you need to read this. Like, you have got to get on this. And he actually, maybe I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to say that. So
that doesn't matter, but yeah.
Okay. So I people can put two and two together. So I started reading this yesterday, and it's a short book. I have the PDF here. It's only 165 pages. That's the full PDF, and that includes the title page, or the cover page. And so it's a short book, and I've gotten maybe just a little over a third of the way into it. I have never read something that is so packed to the brim with
incisive
meaning.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yes. There's not a single word out of place. No. So when I started reading it, I was just reeling. I was absolutely reeling as I was going through it. And it's like a lot of this was stuff that I've been intuiting, kind of like I've been sensing it and I've been feeling drawn toward it, but it was like through a mist. Like I couldn't see what I was looking at. I was just getting brief glimpses of it, and I was trying to get to it. So I was getting just little flashes of insight here and there, and piecing them together as gradually as I could. And I started reading this Ven's book, and it just like teleported me ahead in time. It just blew all the mist away, and I see clearly exactly what I'd been trying to see. And so I stopped in the middle of reading it, and I just emailed him and I said, Ven, this is an absolute powerhouse of insight. There's not a word out of place. And I said that this is like, even if I didn't keep reading it, even if I stopped 50 pages in, it would still be one of the most important books that I've ever read. And I'm confident that this is going to be a crucial, seminal work in the course of human history. That this is the book that marks the transition between ages of the earth. And it's best understood, to me at least, because this is how I came to it, I guess. For me, it's best understood when it's viewed through a lens that's also informed by Jordan Peterson and Curtis Yarvin, because I think that they're both, and Murray Rothbard is in there as well, because it's a description of the foundational layer that's beneath all of them. They're all describing the dynamics that Vin is describing in his book at different resolutions. And Vin is to a large degree, he's kind of synthesized all of that, and he's stripped everything back down to the core of the onion, and he's describing the core of the onion to an extent. Now there's parts of it that I don't disagree with. I haven't run into anything I disagree with. There's stuff that I think is incomplete, and that's not a criticism. That's just like it's an observation. I think that some of these truths are even deeper than Vin has even realized yet, and that's me having not really discussed it with him. I'm sensing that. I know that I talk and write and put a lot of stuff out there, And I realized that I'll have elaborating thoughts, like deeper thoughts on that issue, but it's kind of like, this is what I could get and put out there. And so I have no doubt that Venn he doesn't see himself as having arrived. He's still incorporating new information and new understanding in real time. He's studying the Orthodox Christian Catechism right now, and that I think is actually really fascinating, because I think that serves as a bridge between him and Yarvin and the ideas that they are that they're looking at. And so our goal here, I was talking with Steven about this yesterday, and he was just like, he said I was just like speaking to his soul, that our goal is to take Yarvin and Vin and smash them into each other. It's like a large hadron collider type experience where we take the two of them and just mash them up with each other. And so Adam Patrick is another guy. He's got a new podcast that he's just launched recently that discusses a lot of these same types of things. It's called You're Talking Over Me. And he just had Vin on, and they had just an unbelievable conversation about a bunch of this stuff. And so I was talking to him about this last night as well, and he said that it feels like taking Vin Armani and Curtis Yarvin and smashing them into each other, Large Hadron Collider style, is like either we're going to produce the God particle or we're going to create the black hole that sucks the entire universe into it and it disappears. Like that's kind of the level of potential insight that can be drawn from the ideas that these guys are discussing. But what's interesting to me is that I feel confident that I don't think that Vin has heard of Yarvin. I asked him yesterday how much he's read of Unqualified Reservations, and he said he hasn't even heard of it. So I think that he hasn't read any of Yarvin. And my suspicion is that if he knows who he is, or if he when he first encounters him, his instinct, I believe, is going to be that Yarvin is at direct odds with him. That the two of them are polar opposites. Yeah. I think that's going to be his impression, because that was my impression at first. The worldview that Vin espouses, the agorist, individualist, anarchist, like libertarian view that he holds, and Yarvin's formalist, hierarchical, authoritarian, order-focused view seem to be at odds. But I think that there's a paradox here, and the two of them are not actually at odds. They're directly complementary to one another. They're the two halves together make a whole. Now, I just had something just popped up here saying that I'm offline, so I hope that the stream is still going. Let me double check and just make sure that it's still going here. It looks like it is, but for whatever reason, Ecamm Live is telling me I'm offline. So hopefully this thing keeps working.
Hopefully. Yeah, there's because I had a similar experience, in terms of looking at Jordan Peterson, and you kind of hear this guy talking a little bit about culture, politics, maybe some like self-improvement, kind of telling me to clean my room. I'm like, okay, Jordan, let me go fold some laundry and arrange things accordingly. And then all of a sudden, you just go a little bit deeper, and all of a sudden you're just hearing a 2-hour dissertation about Cain and Abel. You're like, wait, hold on, what? And so then I just kind of rolled with it, and it's what got me back into trying to figure out where the hell I'm at with my lifelong faith crisis. And I think, what you kind of saw when somebody in Jordan Peterson was somebody who, and this is like years ago, this is before, his recent tribulations there. But you saw somebody who, I guess they would say he's like a called person, probably. If you listen to him talk, because
he's a prophet.
He's certainly drawn to, he certainly sees the importance of it, and he, Lord knows he's interested enough to give biblical lectures about it, and definitely sees the value, and he starts going into these he starts going down these roads of, well, what is truth? You know, if something's fiction, you know, but it speaks truth, and it's distilled over time. It becomes something that's almost truer than true if it teaches you how to live. So there's this whole thought process that you enter. You know, when you just go to ask the question, well, geez, is Jordan Peterson like a Catholic or a Protestant or like agnostic, or, you know, that's not going to be a simple answer.
Mm-mm.
You know,
he's caught a lot of heat for that. Like, people ask him, "Do you believe in God?" And he said,
well, what do you mean?
That depends.
Yeah.
What do you mean by
right?
What do you mean by you? What do you mean by believe? What do you mean by God? Yeah. And people roll their eyes at that, and they're kind of like, "Oh, come on, dude! Like, you know what it means." But no, like, this is this is the essence of being a human. This is the essence of being a human being, is parsing these concepts. The concept of you, the concept of belief, and the concept of God are like, they're like the three most self-evident and obscure, difficult things to understand. You can never, the more that you study them, the more that you realize you don't understand any of them. There's like an inverted Russian nesting doll effect here, where with each doll that you open up, there's a larger one inside, and it just gets infinitely larger and larger. Those subjects contain like all of the detail of everything in the universe is contained within you, belief, and God. And so when Jordan has that response, it's very profound, and it's evidence of the level that he's operating on, which is the level that we're trying to excavate ourselves. And right now, what you're seeing with Jordan Peterson is he is having a crisis of faith. That's what he's in at the moment. If you listen to his conversations with Dave Rubin and with Brett Weinstein, and particularly with Jonathan Pageau recently, those three conversations that he's had, he is very clearly grappling with the truth of Christianity, and not just Christianity, but Christianity on the meta level. So this is basically, this is kind of the sort of thing that I'm wanting to talk through here. So I've described Christianity as a meta truth. Like, it's true whether or not the historical facts are true. So if the historical facts are not true, but it's just a story, what?
Like, you're right. And true, if an arrow hits the mark where it's supposed to, that's true. That means true.
That's truth.
Yeah.
So if the Christian story, the story of the gospel, was just a story, if it was just a narrative, just an archetypal narrative, it would have the exact same impact on reality as if the story is actually true itself. Because when you embody that narrative, when you act as if it's true, it changes the world in the same way as if it was actually true and you acted as if it was true. So it's kind of like a hack in the Matrix. It's the one thing that it's the most true thing. If you strip away if you start digging into truth and you get down like all the way to the very core of truth, you arrive at the Christian story. And this is what Venn is digging into. So what he's described is that there's this dichotomy between the material and the mystical. And he defines these. I'm like, I don't want to completely give away. He obviously hasn't published his book yet, so I don't want to just tell you the book, but because I want you guys to go read it for yourselves. But There's the material world and then the mystical world, and both are equally both are equally real. If I can say that, that's you could spend hours just discussing that, like the definition of real there. This is the sort of thing that this is what philosophy nerds geek out on. This is but yeah, so the mystical world and the material world are both equally real. And human cultures develop the material world by pursuing the mystical world. And the deeper that you dig into the material world, the closer you get to the mystical world. And the deeper that you go into the mystical world, the closer you get back to the material world. So there's this symbiosis between the two. And what we're living through right now, history is cyclical between material, mystical, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what we're living through right now is the end of a material age. There have been material ages before, and they have ended, and we've wound up back in a mystical age. And the Dark Ages was the beginning of a mystical age. And the prior to that, the age of the Roman Empire, and then the collapse of the Roman Empire was sort of the end of the prior material age and the beginning of a new mystical age. And the Enlightenment was the beginning, was like the ushering in of a new material age. And now that material age has reached like its apotheosis. It's gone as far as the material can take us, and now we're back to we're on the cusp of entering into a new mystical age. And so this is what Venn has called the dim age. And what we're watching is a literal religious cult taking over the world. The woke movement is finding its full expression in COVID. And the great irony about the woke movement is that they represent the ultimate. They represent the what do we call it? Like the completion of the process of humanity falling asleep. Like humanity has bored itself so deep into the material that it has fallen asleep completely to the mystical and is now becoming vessels for the mystical, for mystical forces. And those mystical forces are functioning through COVID. COVID is like where that expression is happening the most, is where the world is now. If you watch people with COVID, it's fully 100% a religious cult. People are like the mask wearing process, the relationship. These are invisible enemies. There's an invisible enemy that will get you, and if it gets you, it will get everyone else, unless you follow these prescribed rituals. You wear special sacred clothing, and you participate in group rituals to manifest a desired reality. And once you see this model of viewing the human experience, you can't not see it. It completely opens up a new world to you. And that's kind of a pun there, but so
not everyone can see it though.
Yes.
And so I think part of it is like you got kind of touchy feely people like you and me who are going to pick up on this quicker than a lot of people, just because it's like kind of speaking our language. We're probably on the intuitive side of things, and leave a little bit of room for spirituality, and probably for two people who think that we're plenty smart. I think we're too scared to be arrogant, or too God-fearing to be truly arrogant.
Yes.
Pompous and self-important maybe, but not truly arrogant. And I'm wondering where that ties in with the material age, like that's some sort of end stage of the material where arrogance just kind of creeps in. But it's that lack of willingness to explore new ideas that you do see with a lot of libertarians. And I think that this is a very big like moment where things are going to diverge.
Yeah.
So right around COVID and then election time, and the BLM and the everything, just basically 2020. I think you had sort of a split where there were people who basically our audience, or the people who will be our audience or whatever, who were looking for, just got hit with the idea of something's different. The typical ideas that I fall back on are not satisfying the questions for where we're at. So what? And so
Yes.
Then, okay, let me read these old blogs and these new blogs from this guy Curtis Yarvin. I know he doesn't like libertarians, but let me check that out because maybe he's got a point. This guy who kind of talks in riddles, and lives in the middle of the fucking ocean. And I can't. Is he trying to sell me Bitcoin? Like he was a gigolo. Wait, he's a gigolo. Wait, I'll listen. Oh shit, he's saying the most profound things I've heard, in recent history. And so
this is
as
Ben
far as
he's
that
describing.
Book, right. Yeah, sorry. As far as that book goes, basically, it pulls from all the. He's not scared to do. I think what a lot of people are doing, what Matthew and I are doing with this show, if I may call you Matthew, what other people are doing in their discussions, kind of. It's like all of a sudden we're talking about the nature of man, and then we're talking about economics, and we're talking about Pareto distribution, and we're talking about Dunbar's number, and we're talking about communism, we're talking about history, when we're talking about God, we're talking about Jesus, what's real, and all aliens. It just trying to bring all this together. Vin kind of just sat down and said, "Yeah, I think I'm just going to do all that, and I'm going to do it 3 to 4 pages at a time." And it's just like, this is my 2.5 pages on God the Father. Whack. This is my 2.5 pages on this little part of history. Bam. A little bit of economics. And so just bring it sort of all together. And when I talked with him about, I was like, man, I love this book. Who the fuck is this book for? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, it's a fair question.
Well,
you know what I mean? And so I think so. A little bit of the book I think is for him, calling the shot and just being like, here. It's for me calling the shot, but it's for anyone who wants to read it, right? But I think I postulate that the limiting factor would be arrogance. Like if you have any of in you, I mean, forget that book.
Yep.
Just forget it. Yeah.
I think
so
arrogance is like it comes down to the relationship between the self and God, and this is really
if you don't leave room, forget it.
Yeah, this is the difference. This is the key distinction between this was the development of the Enlightenment, and the ultimate where the Enlightenment ultimately took us is the deification of the self, the capital S self, the ego. That's the full realization of the material age, really. Is the conclusion of it is that all that exists is this earth, this reality that we live in, and everything can be explained materially, and the key sovereign unit is the self. Sovereignty ends at the individual self, at the individual ego.
Which is what the idea that libertarians are in love with, is they want just to be their own sovereign.
Right. And what that is that's displacing God and placing the self as God. that's what anarchism is. When you describe anarchy, what you're saying is that the ultimate sovereign unit is the self, and the self should be self-determined. The self, or even more that, it's saying the self is self-determined. That reality flows from us, and that the self is the source of reality, and that the self is the ultimate sovereign character. And this is a key, just absolutely fundamental, critical misunderstanding of the nature of reality and the nature of human consciousness. And I understand how you get to that point. It's like it's the natural logical conclusion of the Enlightenment. And what the Enlightenment was just I tweeted earlier that like something like we're all Christians. Like we're the critical race theory dynamic, the woke dynamic, is Christianity purging itself of non-believers. It's an attempt to purify Christianity. It's a Christian impulse. It's rooted in Christianity. If you want to understand that, read Dominion by Tom Holland. We are all, even the concept of secular, even the concept of atheist is a Christian concept. It didn't exist until the context of Christianity. And so what the Enlightenment did was it took the Christian model and it started with the church and started stripping people. I mean, this was happening prior to the Enlightenment, but it really like picked up steam during the Enlightenment. It was stripping away pieces from the church. It was stripping away tradition. That's what it was, really. It was and this gets back, and I know I'm kind of going all over the place here, but this is what this episode is about. So Ven's book, he describes this cycle between the mystical and the material, and that human cultures develop around tradition and around ritual. Human societies form rituals based around practices that have been proven through evolution to be most adaptive. And eventually, the people who are, as generations pass, the people who are practicing those rituals no longer understand why they're practicing those rituals. They just know that they are, because their parents taught it to them, their parents taught it to them, their parents taught it, all the way back. And that's the relationship with the mystical. These rituals that you perform are you in interacting in the material world with the mystical world. That's where you get shamans. That's where you get priests. That's where religion. All this is all derived from that. And
in the dividing line there is the people who say, "I don't need your traditions, old man."
Yes.
Out of hand.
The GK
people who are people who are wondering. It's like, I wonder. This is interesting. I wonder what purpose this served.
Yes.
That's the dividing line.
Yes. G.K. Chesterton said. Go ahead.
No.
Okay. G.K. Chesterton said, "Don't tear down a fence unless you know why it was built." And that's that principle. That's that concept that your ancestors, if something became a ritual, if it stuck as a ritual, by definition, it served an adaptive purpose. Like by definition, it was true. It worked, because what works is truth. By definition, truth is what works, and what works is true. Right. And capital T, true. And so like this book that Venn is writing is a scientific process. It's like a scientific exploration of the mystical. Because it's science, because what he's doing is he's observing and then he's documenting it and developing a theory and then like pushing that theory onto reality and watching how it affects it, how it interacts. So when he's calling his shot, he's not doing it necessarily, at least, just for like self-glorification to be like, oh, I told you so.
Mhm.
I mean, there may be a dynamic of that, I don't know, but what he's doing is he's making a prediction so that then he can watch what comes to pass and evaluate it against his prediction, and that will tell him if his prediction is true. That will tell him that
Right.
his understanding is true.
And that is that's the line that would tie someone like Yarvin with someone like Vin. It's that that pursuit of truth.
Yes.
Yarvin isn't shitting on libertarianism because he doesn't like it, or because he hates libertarians like we do, like why I shit on libertarians. But it's because it's just like, oh man, it looks like this doesn't work. It looks like this wouldn't work, or this goes against human nature, and it doesn't seem like it can exist. And if it's going to exist, it's going to exist in a very special set of circumstances that we're not close to. So it's what works. He's after the truth. That's why you can have someone like Yarvin, who's an atheist, who's tolerable.
Yes.
You know, and is in some ways just more religious than a lot of Christians that I know.
Yes.
A lot of like
100%.
these new popular Christians or coffee house Christians, or like whatever they call them. Ever since I moved to the South, I always find myself almost immediately in a disagreement that I didn't know I was having if I start talking about religion. If someone just smells that I'm Catholic, big C or small C, there's just like, well, you know, you see, and it's like, wait, what? Wait, huh? We're not. Why are we arguing? But yeah, I mean, but then, you know, everyone knows annoying atheists, right? Like that's like passe. But like, yeah, I mean, Yarvin in a lot of ways, I mean, the reverence for order and you know, the search for truth, and just like, he's more religious in some ways than many Christians.
Absolutely.
And it's that search for truth, the reason why a lot of people were disenchanted with you know, just the libertarian world. I mean, how many people do you know who just like felt they had to disappear from like social media? I mean, we know mutual people who have, but I mean, people just like, I got to get away. You know, this isn't working right now. You know, something's different. Something needs to change, or need a different set of eyes, or whatever it is. I know that for me, I didn't realize it at the time, but when I look back, like 9/11 for me, I had this idea of, I'm never going to know what's real. I'm never going to know what's real. Like I just, when things started coming out about 9/11, I just said, all I care about is the truth as a person. And it doesn't seem like I'm going to have any opportunity to ever know it. So I'm just going to, I'm going to check out, you know? And maybe I should have, but fucking Dave Smith on like Legions of Skank said like libertarian one time, and I was just like, oh yeah, I used to fucking be into that kind of, I mean, you know, and here we are. But I don't know. But yeah, like the search for truth has just kind of, you just kind of realize that like just empirical methods aren't working as well as they once did. So after having, because you just see this general sort of emergent move towards the spiritual in a lot of people who maybe didn't always ever consider themselves spiritual, but you know, just after a few years of kind of looking around saying, oh man, this shit's kind of crazy. Let me try to talk to, a tornado warning. Thanks. Sorry. It did get very dark very quickly. But, you know, after, you know, years of conversations with people who, you know, are trying to say this increasingly ridiculous shit to you, you know, in terms of all this, the wokeism, and, you know, trying to have a reasoned conversation, the rejection of any facts presented, you just kind of realize that, like, you're trying to use a hammer to cut a piece of wood. The problems in front of you do not seem to be nails, right? So I think a lot of people are just saying, like you're saying, what's true is what works. So your facts and your logic don't seem to be working against these people who are, you know, convinced of any number of wild ideas that I'm going to try to tread carefully in terms of saying, but just pick all the wild ass ideas that a lot of the worst woke people in the world take as 100% true, because they believe that it's true, and you realize it's obviously not coming from facts and reason. It's coming from, this is my truth.
Yes. And they'll even say that literally.
That's literally what they'll say, and that's what it's at. And what woke is not just people. Woke is a creation. You know,
it's a spirit.
We're all God's small g, and so our creations. This is its own thing now.
Yes.
This entity is driving.
Yes.
It has some people, Steve, but it's
ideas have people. People don't have ideas. Ideas have people, and woke is an idea, which is synonymous with a god. Like this is when the ancients talked about Dionysus or Mars or Jupiter or whoever, when they described what they were describing was these ideas that embodied people. They personified them. They anthropomorphized them, and then I was going to say they didn't worship necessarily, but they identified them as gods. They recognized them as gods, and they recognized that these forces run the world. That these forces control the people don't control them. And the people are conduits for them. They channel these forces. These forces are being channeled through them, which is interesting because I told Vin that as I was reading this book, I said, I can tell, like, the way that this book is laid out, I recognize the pattern of how he's writing because I've written that way before. And I've written that way when I've experienced these flashes of insight that just stream into my head. I don't know where they come from, but I can sort of figure out how to get myself into the position to make them happen. And it typically involves a lot of marijuana, but it's happened to me before when I've done psilocybin as well. I've had this, it's just like the ideas are alive and they're populating your skull and forming themselves into words and just streaming out of you. It's just, you're just like channeling truth. And you know that it's true just because it is. You experience it as true as, I'm experiencing this computer in front of me. Like, I know this computer is here because I'm experiencing it. I know these ideas coming through me are true because I'm experiencing them. And I told Vin, I can tell that you were literally channeling this book. And he said he was. He wrote the majority of it just whole cloth after he did his morning prayers. He did his morning prayers out on the beach in Saipan, and these words just flowed through him. And he was a conduit for them. He put them out there and then let them go. And the woke thing happened pretty much the same way. The woke thing was channeled. It's a spirit that was channeled that used and uses people as its conduit. This is why then when you talk about when you will go to his Twitter and you listen, he has this term, the dim age. He talks about the dim age, and he also talks about the prince of this world. That the prince of this world is working through things like COVID and the woke movement.
Yeah.
That this is the manifestation of the prince of this world. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've watched. I'm actually in the process of watching what he would call the prince of this world sort of affect like a community that I have built up over the years. I'm seeing it. It's really changing, and it's like it's difficult to watch. But I can see its effects, and I watched it in a different community too, during the BLM summer that we had there. I don't know what to call it. I guess, yeah, BLM summer kind of works. But yeah, I've watched different communities get kind of ravaged very quickly with the people. Not the people themselves, but like you're saying, with these ideas as acted via the people.
Mm.
And it can destroy things very quickly. And I think,
And
oof,
it operates people on a collective level. That's the thing. Like each
right,
individual person has their experience of it, but
right.
it embodies people as a
Mm,
collective and moves that collective as a
hmm
single unit.
hmm So there is there is this. That's one of the things that I was that when you were talking, I was thinking of. But um, there's there is this tendency when you see something that you can't stand, you want to fight against it in sort of the equal opposite direction. So you have people who are individualists by nature in some regard, right? And so they see this war on destroying the individual, um, and so they just want to be like hyper individualists. So
Hmm.
like a lot of libertarians, basically, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. Um,
What they're
but
doing it's almost like a Mott and Bailey kind of thing where they're saying
yeah,
they're recognizing the truth that the individual exists and the individual has
hmm
value. The whole spark of
hmm
divinity in the individual thing,
hmm
but
hmm
then they're they're not taking the conclusion of that. They're imputing a different conclusion to it, which is the individual is sovereign. The individual is self-governed. They're saying because
right.
the individual exists and has value, because there is a spark of divinity in everyone. They say because there is a spark of divinity in everyone, therefore each
hmm
individual person is God. Each
You're
individual person
forgetting,
is
yeah,
self-governed, is
but
sovereign.
they're taking the origin of the spark of divinity out of the equation,
Right,
and
right.
it has to be in the that's where they're fucking up.
Because the
It
origin of
has
the
to be
spark
in
of
the
the
equation.
divinity is God. It's God
You have
expressed
to,
through humans.
right. And
Yeah.
so whatever you choose God to be, um, it has to be something, and it has to serve something higher, and the individuals have to righteously choose community, not be overtaken, by these, poisonous ideas, but they have to righteously choose community. Is going to be community and human organization, self-organization is going to be, um, the way out of this if there is one.
Mm,
That's really that's where what the battle
right, right.
is against self-organization. And so the trick that, that they're doing over there on the wokest side of things, basically, and you'll see it, that like it would be framed as like a war on the individual, making everyone out to be selfish and things like that. And that's obviously, demonstrated, very cleverly with the masks. You're just selfish, and so they're making you out to be, a fallen angel. They're making you out to
Yes.
be, yeah.
That you've fallen
So
away from the truth. That's why it's a
that's the
Christian
trick.
urge to purify Christianity.
hmm and that's the trick. But the answer isn't, damn right I'm an individual. That's not the answer.
Right.
The answer is, sort of the third leg of the table,
You
as it
said
often
something
is.
there. You said something there
I really did.
that
Goddamn right I did.
we said some that you manifest your God. Whatever your God is, that God shines through that spark of divinity in you. And so the question is, are you going to be are you are you going to become your own God and place your will in the throne of your life? Or are you going to be subsumed into the one true God and submit your will to his and let him be the God who shines through you? That's the
Right.
that's and when you do that, other people do that as well. And those people all operate together as a single entity. So this woke movement, this is God, this is a God manifesting itself through these people and operating them as a unit. So this is the mystical world shining through into the material world, using humans as its channel, as its conduits. And so Emma here, she said, have you read any of Dr. Michael Heiser's books? And I love that she brought that up because I've just started one of Michael Heiser's books. I need to finish it. I've got so many books that I'm reading through. But he makes an observation that directly relates to this. He said he takes he's a academic. He's studied like ancient Hebrew and ancient Hebrew culture, and so what he did is he wrote this book to. He said that modern people read the Bible, and we bring our modern conception of the mystical to bear on our understanding of it. And he said the Bible was written to an audience of people who had a completely different conception of the spirit world or the mystical. And so he wrote this book for the purpose of trying to help us see through the eyes of the people who would have written that book and written those books, and who the books would have been written for. And
you're working with a totally different brain and totally different life experience than what is conducive for being able to really understand the Bible.
So you're interpreting a completely different reality from what the original audience of the Bible would have interpreted. Mm-hmm. So what he's trying to do is he's trying to take us back and put us in those shoes, which is also what Tom Holland does in the book Dominion. He goes back and he kind of rebuilds. He outlines the way that the Western mind developed itself through Christianity. Western and Christian are the same thing. And it's we are dominated by Christianity. And this is why religion and politics they're all the same thing. It's all the same thing. But what Michael Heiser points out is he takes the part where it says that when God says, let us make man in our image, and the Bible talks about us being made in the image of God. And he said he breaks down the grammar of the wording that's used. And what it is not that we understand that to be like we're made in the image of God, so we're like copies of God, kind of, or we're like we're made like to mimic God, sort of. Or we kind of don't have a super clear understanding of it. But what he says is that the accurate way to understand that is that we are made to be God's imagers. So we are made to image God into this reality. So we are made to be a conduit from the spirit world into the physical world. We are made to be for God to shine through us. We're to be the image of God into the spirit world. And that reality, that blew my mind when I first read that. I put the book down and I haven't read beyond that point, and that's within the first couple chapters.
That line itself kind of shows something that I think Vin had put the idea out, had talked about the idea a little bit. God made man in the image of God. Okay, so our brain interprets it as such. And the explanation you just gave kind of indicates this idea that's common among the world of the mystical, where time isn't necessarily flowing in one direction.
Yes.
We think the future, the past affects the future, but a mystical person is perfectly comfortable with the idea that the future affects the past. But yes, in some, it does though. It's observable that it does,
and it does it through us. We're the way that the future interacts with the past.
Tom Brady's 147 years old. Got let go of the Patriots and the coach that everyone ascribed his success to, right? Because he's like a 185th round draft pick or whatever. And Bill Belichick and his coaching is why Tom Brady won all these Super Bowls. And he goes to fucking Tampa Bay as a 147-year-old man, and has a very average season, right? And then halfway through the season starts to sort of take over the offense and ultimately wins the Super Bowl. If that doesn't happen, then he's a bum who rode on Belichick's coattails for his entire career.
Now that it's happened, Belichick was a bum who rode on his coattails.
Didn't know when to quit.
Yeah.
And now he's the greatest athlete in the history of time. And it's the future has forever affected the past.
Yeah.
and like our brains just don't, you know, in a lot of ways, like the Enlightenment has just totally poisoned like a modern brain to understand why the fence was built in that we have stumbled across, that we're attempting to take down.
Yes.
And took down probably what in the 60s and you know, maybe even before that, and here we are. But with that, the same thing. If me reading the Bible and listening to Jordan Peterson talk about the Bible and whatever else, living out God's word gives me a fulfilling life, or I mean, if it frees civilization from the hell that we're in some regard, maybe not in our lifetime, you know, but maybe 100 years from now, then it is perfectly reasonable to say that Jesus Christ was born of a virgin and died on the cross.
Yeah.
I mean, how is it anything less than true?
Right. The whole idea of linear time that you were describing is itself a product of Christianity. So when Western secular atheists see themselves as the pinnacle of human evolution, that human evolution
yes.
has been a trajectory up till now, and that there's a beginning and an end of time, that whole thing is all based on a development of Christian thought. And when the Bible was written in biblical times, I don't think that there was any conception of linear time then. I think everyone who existed then all believed in cyclical time. The linear concept is a distinctly Abrahamic state and or belief system or a set of ideas. And basically every other ancient religion is all cyclical. And we've only got like 20 more minutes here before I've got to go, and I've got several other things here I want to do. So I don't want to dig any further into that for now. But I think we'll come back to that point at some point in the future. So one thing I wanted to circle back on. Or did
we already?
One thing I wanted to circle back on was when you're talking about Yarvin and him and his pursuit of the truth. And just real quick, for people who are watching, Steven's camera has done, it's like doing weird, it's got weird lighting things kind of, and the focus keeps adjusting a little bit. That's because just before we got started, it's fine. But just before we got started, his computer shot the bed, so he's recording this on his phone. This is the magic of the phone.
Yes.
So just so you guys know, that's what's happening. So Yarvin is he has this appearance, or like a sheen kind of being a materialist thinker. He talks like a materialist. He uses he has a materialist voice. And I think that he would probably see himself as a materialist, I think. And in that sense, he's very similar to Jordan Peterson. They're both fundamentally like humanist, and they're committed to materialism, but they're both grappling with the mystical, and they're both open to it and willing to engage with it. And part of the way that the mystical is made manifest to us is through archetypes. And this is why when I was sitting here thinking about him, I'm like, is Yarvin, would he be a mystical or material, person? And it struck me that his ideas are very mystical. He talks about mind viruses and memes and archetypes, right? And like everything he's discussing is all very mystical.
He uses the language of the material world to describe things that are very mystical.
Yes.
And then uses mystical language to describe things that are material.
Yes. And then he takes mystical observations and attempts to derive material conclusions from them. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if that's something that he would necessarily
agree with,
but I see that. And But Peterson is again is very similar. He's desperately trying to be materialist, and he's trying to make the mystical material. That's what both of them are driven by. They both are ultimately in service to the material, so they're trying to bring the mystical down and force it into the material. They're trying. They aren't willing to just exist with the mystical and just let it breathe. They have this urge, which is an enlightenment urge, to force everything into the material world. And so the question is, are they like, will they ultimately give in? And the one who's truly grappling with that is Jordan Peterson. He's on the cusp of killing himself, like literally thinking himself to death, because he's grappling with this crisis of faith. And that's ultimately what faith is. Faith is the way that you interact with the mystical. And everyone uses faith. Everyone engages with the mystical in one way or the other, whether they believe it or recognize it or not. So that was my way. As I'm considering this possibility of trying to use a Large Hadron Collider of ideas to mash Vin Armani and Curtis Yarvin together. I'm trying to forecast how they're going to engage with each other, how they're going to engage with each other's ideas. And because I think that they're both programmers, which is really interesting, because I want them to debug each other. I want them to take their programmer minds and set to debugging each other's worldviews. I would say right now that I think that I would think that Yarvin probably needs to incorporate more of Vin than Vin does of Yarvin. But I think that I think there's stuff about Vin that is, I can still hear the enlightenment talking through him, and that's what I want to talk about once we get him on the show here. I think that's gonna be fantastic. But okay, so that was a subject there I want to discuss. So now there's two more things I want to do. And I should have asked him before I did this if this would be okay, but I'm just going to ask for forgiveness rather than permission. I'm going to read a couple little excerpts of his book. And the first one I want to read is his discussion of logos. So he talks about logos, cosmos, and chaos. And he says reality is broken down into these three dynamics or whatever. I don't know what word to use for it. And that cosmos fundamentally represents what is, and chaos is kind of like what could be, and logos is consciousness. And so then the Trinitarian view of God is these three archetypes. It's these three beings, sort of, or I don't even know what you would call it. But so God the Father represents the cosmos, what is. The Holy Spirit represents chaos, or what could be, and Jesus represents logos, or consciousness. And I'm repeating what he's saying. So this is an idea that I'm starting to try to. I'm putting these glasses on and putting on this filter on the world and trying to see if it makes different things come into focus for me. So when he describes logos, he says, logos is the concept of consciousness itself, the idea that discernible patterns exist and can be observed. And ultimately, that's what archetypes are. Archetypes are just patterns. And when you begin to recognize, your consciousness is the process of recognizing patterns. If you think about it, to recognize a pattern, you have to have there has to be the presence of time and matter. Like both of these things have to exist, because for there to be a pattern, you have to have a differential of time between one thing and another thing. So consciousness is the thing that recognizes these patterns, and that's where we embody consciousness as we engage with reality, and that's us like embodying the logos is this kind of this idea here. So logos is the concept of consciousness itself, the idea that discernible patterns exist and can be observed. Of course, the comprehension of even the pattern of the words you are currently reading makes the existence of logos self-evident. Once you start identifying patterns, you start realizing that the patterns themselves have patterns, and the patterns of the patterns have patterns. This is what, so archetypes, if you listen to Jordan Peterson, this is his observation of like the nature of dominance hierarchies and archetypes and myths and all of this stuff is all like a myth is like a collection of archetypes, and an archetype is a collection of patterns. And what you realize, what Venn is trying to get across to people is that our existence has no meaning without narrative, without myth. The way we understand this is why stories are so powerful to us, because the way we understand our own existence is by telling stories to ourselves. And as each of us encounters a different piece of the story, and we put them all together to get an idea of the entire whole, and then we build institutions or constructs or systems to try to embody those stories, to embody all of that data that we've taken in together. And then that's where you derive rituals, that's where you derive all these different practices, and those start persisting, and that's how a society is built up around those things. And after a period of time, the myth becomes extrapolated away from the original underlying truth, to the point where the myth is a representation of the truth, and the myth is the truth. Yeah, it's the ultimate essence of the truth. And so we arrange our societies around myths. And right now what we're seeing is the conflict of myths. This woke movement is a myth. It's a new myth. Fairy tales are myths that embody religious truths. It's very ironic that like the new atheists will call the story of Christianity, they'll call religions fairy tales. It's like they don't realize the truth of what they're encountering there. Because fairy tales are archetypical myth. They're archetypes. All what's his name? Pinocchio and Snow White and Cinderella. All these things are all archetypes. They're archetypal stories that are older than, they're like as old as time itself. We have no idea how far back these stories go, but they keep getting passed on because they're true. They're truer than true. They're meta truths. And so logos is the concept of consciousness, which is the idea that we can recognize these patterns and derive meaning from seeing them. And so that's what he kind of lays out here at the beginning of this chapter. He says, logic is behavior most closely representative of logos, as opposed to representing cosmos or chaos. Logic is the examination and prediction of patterns, explicitly acknowledging that there are clear rules, or cosmos, which govern the structure of patterns and their possible transformations over time, which is chaos. To manifest logos is to be logical. The difficulty for the materialist comes when mysteries and miracles are at hand. A mystery is some phenomenon which appears with current information to defy logic, but as more information is learned, becomes explainable in rational terms. A miracle is some phenomenon that is both mysterious and so improbable that the use of the scientific method, requiring reproducibility, as an explanatory tool is simply impossible. Mysteries and miracles do not defy logic so much as they elude logic. So logic is dependent upon the data that you already have. A mystery or a miracle is something that outstrips the data that you currently have. And the materialist wants to say, well, we already have all the data, because the materialist is fundamentally rooted in worship of the self. And you can't say the self is incomplete and also the self is sovereign and worthy of worship. The self has to be complete.
You became your own God, so you can't. That's the root of that arrogance, and that's why that's such the dividing line.
Right. So it's fundamentally materialism and the denial of myth, or the denial of miracle and mystery, is fundamentally anti-scientific. It's directly opposed to science. It's directly opposed to logic. It's illogical. And he says that at the end here. He says, it is in fact illogical or out of attunement with logos to adopt a position that our current cognitive framework, individual or collective, is sufficient at any resolution. So to say that we have the whole picture already is an illogical statement. It defies the nature of logic. In order to make the miraculous mundane, individuals must experience miracles repeatedly and at scale. To dismiss mysteries and miracles out of hand or to fall into a state of worship is to deny attunement with logos. Attuning with logos, so tuning into logic or to logos or to consciousness, tuning into consciousness is the practice of journeying into the mystery in search of the miracle. All patterns are contained in the logos. The logos is all patterns. The logos is eternal. This is logical. That chapter, that I just read you part of the chapter, but that chapter just, I want to go through and just read it again, but we don't have time. And you guys just go back and just listen to everything I just read. Listen to it as many times as you need to embody it, because this is Christ. This is what Christianity is built around. Christ is the logos. In the beginning was the word logos. In the beginning was the logos, and the logos was with the cosmos, God, and the word was the cosmos. Logos and cosmos. Jesus is the word. Christ is the word. Christ is the logos. Christ is logic. Christ is the manifestation of consciousness into the material world. And as we embody Christ, we manifest our own consciousness into the material world. And we, as he put here, where was it? He said, attuning with the logos, or attuning with Christ, or attuning with your consciousness, or attuning with consciousness, is the practice of journeying into the mystery in search of the miracle. Attuning with Christ is the practice of journeying into the mystery in search of the miracle. And that's where we are now. We are on the cusp of a new age of miracles, a new age of mystery. And we're journeying into that. Now, what's interesting is that there's the saying, he quotes it earlier on in this. He said that that any technology sufficiently complicated is indistinguishable from magic, or something like that. Basically, magic is just technology you don't understand yet. So I can't wait to read the rest of this, because he gets into Bitcoin later in it that I haven't read yet. And so I'm very interested, because what we're going to be entering into is a new era of technology, because technology is just magic. We're entering into a new era of magic and technology, and magic is just technology we don't understand yet. So, but then you've got Uncle Ted and his position on technology. So like all these, we're running out of time. So there's one last thing that I wanted to do in this episode, and that was, I want to read the story that he tells at the beginning of the book, the story of the sunken idol. And again, Ven, if you would rather I have not done this, I'm sorry. I just have to ask for forgiveness, because this, I think, this caps off what we're saying, and it's going to leave people with a lot to really ponder. And again, as soon as the book is available, I think it's available on Amazon now. So go buy it. Render Unto Caesar by Ven Armani. So did you have anything else you wanted to say before I read this?
No, well, before we sign off, because I'm probably signing off right after this, but you're talking about fairy tales. If you want some fascinating, there's a YouTube series where Jordan Peterson in a classroom just goes through different fairy tales, Pinocchio, Sleeping Beauty. I sort of forget some of them, but I actually got a lot of answers to questions on my perpetual faith crisis, listening to those those analyses of the fairy tales was a lot of answers for questions I had in faith. And it, I don't know, I just think of people who be quick to just like make fun of a guy like Jordan Peterson talking about Pinocchio and children's stories, quote unquote, and just dismissing it as ridiculous. I just can't. That arrogance just really, it just runs through me, man. I don't know. It always has with people. I've been around like a lot of really smart people who just let, and I didn't know what it was at the time, but they let their intelligence become their god, and it just puts a wall up in your life when you do that. But for the people who are open-minded enough, and I think clearly anyone who's watching this for 2 hours, is those, if you haven't seen them, those videos on YouTube, they're right in the classroom. I don't know how, it looks like it's from a long time ago too, but he's just basically giving a lecture that's totally captivating about Pinocchio and Snow White and a lot of other children's stories. There's so much in there.
And isn't it fascinating that those are children's stories? That these archetypal, that these archetypal stories are the stories that we evolved teaching our children. They're thought of as something that you teach to children. They're thought of as simple because they are simple, but it's the simplest things are the simplest things are the most profound.
Right, and just anything has that surface level that a child can understand, but there's always something deeper underneath it, and that is used. That's used for purposes of good as well as purposes for evil. Right. So so for a lot of Disney movies, modern day, man, Jordan Peterson, not a big fan of Frozen, for example. But man, all the contempt he could muster into calling it a piece of rubbish or whatever he called it. But yeah, I mean, they're mimetic, you know.
Yeah.
That's what they are. And I don't know if Pinocchio's been canceled yet, but I don't know what children's stories have been on the chopping block. But anything of value that speaks to living out the logos in any way whatsoever. If they haven't gone after it yet, I'm sure it's around the corner.
Hold on just a sec. I just got to send a text real quick.
Texting Vin. What's up, Vin?
No.
Just reading your book on the internet for free.
That's right.
See you tomorrow. LOL.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, I think that was basically all I wanted to say. I wanted to be finished a few minutes ago, so I'm gonna just get through this here real quick. But if you guys like the show, I'm just gonna read this story, and we're gonna end it right at the end of this story.
Right at the end.
But yeah. Thank you guys, for those of you who've sat through this. Thank you for listening, and I hope that it's been enlightening. I hope that it's been I hope we went somewhere. I hope this triggered stuff in your minds. It sparked thoughts for you.
And just super duper quick. I think this is sort of the road, like, current events and politics and theory and history and economics and all that stuff. It's like that all is definitely of interest to us, and we're definitely going to talk about it. But I think this is always going to be the essence of the show in many ways. Yes. It's always going to be underlining whatever it is that we're talking about. And I think we've spent some episodes talking about just like, look, man's not organized in the way that is would be requisite for like a libertarian society. Look, this is how power works. Libertarians are okay, fine. But deeper under that is this, and I think this is more the essence of the show, whether we have explicit episodes where we are going off and exploring in a bunch of different directions or not. And I do think people see that.
100%.
But I wanted to say it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep. So if you like this, if this is something that tickles your pickle, then do us a favor and like this episode here, and then subscribe to the show. Whether you're watching this on YouTube, if you're watching this on Facebook, just go over to YouTube, look up King Pilled, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And we've got a goal. We're trying to get to 1,000 subscribers before we get kicked off of YouTube. And have to port over to a different platform. And if you're listening to this later on, after we've gotten this uploaded as an audio version to a podcast, then just subscribe on your podcatcher of choice, and do us a favor and leave us a review. Right now, you could just, if we don't have that up yet, obviously, so you can put it in the comments on YouTube or wherever. Let us know what you think, or share it and let other people know what you think of this episode. But if you're listening to this later on iTunes, leave us a review there, a 5-star review and or 5-star rating and a review, and let us know. Let every other person who comes by know what you think of this show and why they should listen to it as well. Okay, all that being, and then follow me on Twitter at RealKingPilled. Follow Steven on Twitter at Messina Inc. So all that being said, I'm going to read this story. So the story's called The Sunken Idol. Far away, in the middle of the great sea, a canoe approached an island held sacred by a certain island people. On the boat were the aged chief, his young son, and the 10 strongest warriors of the tribe, noblemen of the 10 clans which comprised the people. Drenched in sweat but undeterred, the 10 warriors rowed the boat toward a secluded bay. The men had been rowing nonstop for 3 days and nights, through storms and high seas, guided by the chief's navigation, for only he knew the location of this island. As they entered the sheltered cove, the chief's son gazed down into the water and could see the seabed far below him through the crystal clear waters. All at once, the chief yelled, "Stop!" And the warriors reversed their stroke in a maneuver practiced by their people since the dawn of time. The boat came to an abrupt halt at a place directly in the middle of the bay. The chief stood and, reaching below his seat, pulled forth a stone idol that had, until now, been hidden from the other companions under a woven cloth. They all recognized this stone idol as the totem of their people, an item that had, for the entire lives of the warriors and the chief's son, stood at the center of their village, protecting the tribe and the land. To the horror of the warriors, the chief hefted the idol above his head and threw it into the sea, where it sunk to the bottom of the bay, only visible as a faint outline in the shadow of the seabed. "Now we return home," the chief said, settling back into his seat. The warriors were too shocked to speak. The several days' return was made in silence. When they finally arrived back on their home island, the warriors quickly hurried off to inform their respective clans of the blasphemous act they had seen. The chief and his son were left alone on the beach. The chief turned to his son and spoke for the first time in days. "That idol was raised from the sea by the first great chief, who united our people. It has served to unite us ever since." With that, he walked away. On the next moon, when it was time for the warriors to gather and make the great fishing expedition that would feed the people for that moon, the chief and his son again stood alone on the beach. The warriors, seeing the chief's treatment of the idol as a great affront to the tribe, refused to join. So did they prevent their clansmen from obeying the chief. Only the chief's son stayed obedient. The chief and his son prepared their canoe and set to sea. For 3 days and nights they fished in the deep ocean. Because the chief was aged and could no longer hold an oar, set the sails, or handle a rod or net, the son labored under the chief's approving gaze. Through the son's work and providence, they returned with a catch equal to that of 10 fishermen. The chief told the weary son to divide up the catch and take an even portion to each of the 10 warriors to give to his clan. "Why?" asked the son. "Why do you give fish to these men after they've disobeyed and refused to fish?" The chief replied, "In 3 moons they will fish." On the next moon, when it was time to hunt in the dark jungle at the center of the island in order to feed the people for that moon, the chief and his son again stood alone on the beach. Again the clans refused to join, and now they even conspired against the chief. So the chief and his son set off alone. Because the chief was aged and could no longer pull a bow, for 3 days and nights the son hunted alone. He hunted at night, divining his direction and location by orienting himself to the stars which peeked through the breaks in the forest canopy. Thanks to his labor and providence, the son caught game equivalent to that of 10 hunters. The chief told his weary son to divide up the game and take an equal portion to each of the 10 warriors to give to his clan. "Why?" asked the son. "Why do you give meat to these men after they've disobeyed and refused to hunt?" The chief replied, "In 2 moons they will hunt." On the next moon, when it was time to collect pearls from the oysters in the bay to trade them to the tribe on a nearby island, in exchange for food that would feed the tribe for that moon, the chief and his son again stood alone on the beach. The clans, now poisoned by the hatred of the 10 warriors, refused to even acknowledge the chief, and the warriors, drunk on their new power, had even begun abusing their own clansmen. So the chief and his son set off alone. Because the chief was aged and could no longer dive, for 3 days and nights the son dove again and again, with his knife in his teeth, gathering pearls from oysters deep in the waters of the bay. Thanks to his labor and providence, he gathered oysters equivalent to that of 10 divers. The chief told his weary son to divide up the pearls and take an equal portion to each of the 10 warriors to give to his clan. "Why?" asked the son. "Why do you give pearls to these men after they've disobeyed and refused to dive?" The chief replied, "In 1 moon they will dive." On the next moon, the aged chief died. The son had just finished burying his father when the 10 warriors accosted him in the center of the village, at the pedestal now empty where the idol had once stood. Your father destroyed the idol, their leader said. Because of this, you have no claim to be chief. We will rule our people, not you. As for you, you are forever banished from this island, left to die alone on the open sea. Once again, the son found himself on the beach. But he was not alone. The spirit of his father was with him. And so he outfitted his canoe and began to row. For 3 days and nights he rowed with the strength of 10 men navigating by the stars. His memory fragmented like glimpses of the sea through the jungle canopy. At the end of the 3rd day, he arrived at the sacred island and brought his canoe to a stop above the sunken idol. He dove into the water and dove over and over for hours on end, getting deeper on each dive until he finally reached the idol and, with a powerful push of his legs on the seabed, brought it to the surface and hoisted it into his canoe. With the strength of 10 men, the son rowed back to his home island, carried the idol into the village center, and placed it on the pedestal. The people of the 10 clans, who had been summoned to the village by the 10 warriors to celebrate the usurpation of the aged chief, saw that the son had returned the idol and, remembering his generosity over the past moons, bowed to him and vowed that he truly was their rightful new chief. They swore that forevermore they would obey him when called to fish, to hunt, and to dive for pearls. They brought the 10 warriors to the new chief as prisoners, blades to their throats, waiting for the chief's command to execute them. But instead of killing the warriors, the chief freed them of their bonds and let them again join their clans. Why, asked the people, why do you give life to these men after they have disobeyed and refused to let you live among them? The new chief smiled. Many moons passed. Far away, in the middle of the great sea, a canoe approached an island held sacred by a certain island people. On the boat were the aged chief, his young son, and the 10 strongest warriors of the tribe.